Depending on how long the fire goes out, we could actually set up some stationary meters that would measure in place real time until we pick them up.
Which is some of the things that are burning. Are these things that will dissipate from the air, or are these the things that will leave a residue on vehicles, countertops, windows, doors, knobs?
I wouldn't speculate. We'll have to wait and see as the fire goes what we find.
So that what did you test that for as you move forward, or?
I'm not testing like soot on cars, if that's what you're asking.
What I'm asking is based on the compounds you're looking at. These are the types of compounds that either burn in the air and then they dissipate because of the heat or the fire, or these the types of compounds that will stick to the surfaces of vehicles, doors, and those kind of things.
I'm not going to speculate.
Thanks.
So they don't have a list of all the things that were burning in that building yet? They should have hazmat records. It's a recycling plant. They need to have some sort of records of everything that they held in that building.
So, this is a recycling.
Do you see him looking down? Do you see him looking down when they ask about, do you have a list of all the contaminants? And he's kind of like looking around and then looking down, and it's like, oh shit, you got us. We don't actually know what we even should be testing for because we don't know what the hell was in that plant. I don't know if you could rewind like 15 seconds to show that, but a body language expert looking at this, like this guy, yeah.
This is a recycling plant.
They should have hazmat records. It's a recycling plant. They need to have some sort of records of everything that they held in that building.
So, this is a recycling plant.
We can still.
That's my understanding. Maybe that matters in there. There's a system for recording what products you would have on hand, and that system goes to the state. It's called a Tier 2 system.
Right.
And that was discussed last night, and this particular facility, I believe, does not have records on the Tier 2 system. Yeah.
Okay.
So no records, no clue what's in there, so no clue what they're testing for, and they're seemingly not doing tests that very clearly should be done. He flat out said, no, we're not testing soot that's landing on cars and stuff. Like, why not? If you don't know what the hell was in the building, the way to find out what you need to be testing for is like, the soot definitely came from that. Swab the soot, send it into a lab. It doesn't, am I crazy?
A wise man named Louis DeAngelis said in the situation of East Palestine, which we're still covering, why don't you just say we don't fucking know? We don't know, which means take precautions.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he says, I'm not going to speculate about whether you should be touching or cleaning surfaces in your home, that means we don't know.
Right. Right. Use an abundance of caution. We are still looking into this. This situation is still developing. We don't know what was in the plant. The owner of the building clearly had some issues going on. Out of an abundance of caution, we recommend you steer clear of this. We recommend that if you're close, you should put a mask on. We don't know. We don't know is okay to say. It's better than lying to people like has been done before. I'm not saying that he's necessarily lying right now because he's careful to say we're not going to speculate. We're not going to speculate. But in East Palestine, the EPA definitely lied. They've lied to people, saying things are fine. Again, you don't need an air detector to know that things are not okay there and have not been okay there. In this case, it's still early. You've got time not to lie. You've got time not to lie. So let's be honest to people. We don't know is an acceptable answer. Say we don't know. Take extra precautions and avoid, number one, putting all of these people at risk of God knows what, of carcinogens and all sorts of stuff that could affect them now, but also a decade down the line. But also save, try to have some credibility of your agency, saying like, oh, well, we told you it was fine before, and now we're learning that it's not. And then people lose all trust in you. Again, it's the same thing with all of these agencies that people wonder why trust in institutions are essentially at an all-time low. These folks wonder why the trust in all these institutions are at an all-time low when they just lie to people constantly, and then they expect them to take them at face value when something happens.
This is what happens when you have no oversight, no enforcement, failed regulations, failed infrastructure.
Yeah.
This is what happens. And I in my Flint reporting, I've spoken with people at the EPA who will not go on the record because they don't, it's the bureaucracy and they don't want to lose their job and benefits and pensions or whatever. But they are as boiling about the intentional sloppiness, and they make the point that we're underfunded at the EPA, which is a whole nother cabal, because we're spending $850 on the military. Every breath I take, we're sending another $1 million to Ukraine, but you're underfunding the EPA at a time of the climate crisis, mass industrial explosions, derailments, wildfires, unprecedented storms. I don't really even want to argue with you if you're saying this is all bullshit. If you're a climate denialist, go away. You reap what you sow for what we're spending money on. The Pentagon is the biggest contributor to the climate change in the world. The Pentagon is. But, you know, he's basically bullshitting because they don't know, and they don't want to say we don't know.
Right.
And this is the playbook. This is what Aaron Brockovich has told me. It's minimize, obfuscate, instead of saying we don't have all the answers yet. Frankly, it's insane to me that the evacuation zone is only a half mile. We're going to get to the health official who contradicts herself about how far should the evacuation zone be. But this EPA official was just towing the company line. And they also said that they're doing snapshot readings of it for air testing. I don't know, you know more about it than I from East Palestine, but I don't really think snapshot readings are going to be effective in this case with a still moving fire.
Right. I mean, they at this stage of this, like, okay, I think what they're saying when they're doing that is like they're going and they're kind of moving around because they don't have permanent resources in a spot that is like doing the ongoing testing. But you're the EPA. Like, but just drop. It doesn't take that long to set these things up. I saw them all over East Palestine. I saw them being moved where you've got an air testing device that can be hanging on a street sign, and you put it there, and then you get a continuous 24-hour reading. They've got to have more of them. Just it's they're probably spending more time driving around in circles going to all these places where they could be installing these devices that will give a 24-hour reading. So I agree that is a step that definitely should be taken. And I'll say right now too that we have 500 people watching right now. Smash the like button to help get this out to more folks. We're going to continue staying on this story. We've been covering East Palestine on and off. Not on and off, basically continuously since February 3rd when that happened. Yeah, like the video to help get this out to more folks.
Let's keep going with the EPA official.
Yeah.
That was all of the video for him.
Okay, so let's now go. I believe this was I don't know if it was a federal or a state environmental official. So I can't. It was excuse me. I don't know if it was a federal or a state health official. But well, regardless, she contradicts herself, and I think gives absolutely insane answers. Go ahead.
Sure. The health department's main concern at this point is the particulate matter, as Jason had talked about. These are very fine particles, and if they're breathed in, can cause all kinds of respiratory problems, burning of the eyes, tightening of the chest. It could aggravate asthma, it could cause bronchitis, and all kinds of things. So we are stressing to the public to honor the evacuation zone. It's for your safety that the evacuation zone is there. And if you can see the smoke, you're in the smoke, get out of the smoke. If there's a reason that you need to go back to your home to get medication, you need to work with our officials on that site so we can safely escort you in and out of this evacuation zone. But any smoke, whether it has, benzene or any of the other compounds that Jason spoke about, is dangerous because of the particulate matter that's in that. And breathing that in and of itself, just the particulate matter is dangerous for all people, but in particular, people with chronic illnesses, COPD, and the elderly. So we are concerned about that.
At this point, is that neighborhood closed then? Is that neighborhood, if I live in this neighborhood right where the fire is and smoke, is that shut down?
We still are maintaining a half-mile radius surrounding the fire and having the evacuation of that.
We're supposed to be working at 95, I know we doubled the COVID, right? But what is the best way to manage? People still have to go to work, to do, right, life goes on in Richmond. What is the best way to handle this?
Absolutely, absolutely. Masks do filter out particulate matter. When we get into really fine particulate matter, N95s are the type of masks that would be the most protective. But again, I want to reiterate, we want people to stay out of the evacuation zone. Wearing an N95 mask will provide a certain amount of protection, but the best protection you're going to get is to stay out of the smoke. So.
Evacuation area is half mile, but if I'm a mile and a half, am I any safer? Am I much safer? Should I do anything different?
If you're seeing, smelling, eyes burning, experiencing any kind of difficulty in breathing, you need to evacuate that area, get out of that area.
So if you didn't hear the last question, she's still talking about the half-mile evacuation zone. So a reporter asked, well, if I'm a mile and a half away and if I'm a mile and a half away and I can see it and smell it, what should I do? And she's saying if you can smell it, if you're smelling it, if it's burning your eyes or causing issues, you should leave. So you're saying that a mile and a half away, you could still be inhaling it, burning your eyes, then you should leave. Then why is your evacuation zone only, like the answer to that, if your evacuation zone is only a half mile, should be, we don't believe you would have those effects beyond a half mile. That's why our evacuation zone is a half mile.
Yeah.
Why would people be having those symptoms a mile and a half away? And we just read people who were smelling it 10 miles away.
Right.
It's just totally haphazard. A half mile away? Look at the plume. That's not restricted to a half mile. But she just contradicted herself.
Right, and I mean, you've got that kind of artificial half-mile boundary. Again, this is not to continue to keep tying it to East Palestine, but similar story in East Palestine. It was at first, kind of a mile. It might have even been a little bit smaller at first, but with residents there I talked to, as the burn was happening, they were literally like moving the line a little bit of like, actually, we're now going to move it a little bit further now, just because of how big it was. So very arbitrary half a mile line here. There's not a magic bubble over this area, as much as they want there to be a magic bubble, there isn't. So it sounds like the guidance should be, yes, if you're in a half a mile, you have to leave. And if you smell this, you should also leave. But that message of, if you're smelling this, you have to leave, I'm only hearing that in this press conference. Is that going out in a mass text message to everybody in the area? Because those resources exist. I saw on Twitter people getting text messages, if you live a half a mile from this, you need to evacuate. I notably did not see any of those screenshots on Twitter, and I'm sorry we don't have any of them right here. I did not see, if you smell smoke, you should also leave. And it sounds like that's the information that's being given there. And I just wanted to say, too, because I know you said you were unsure what her role was. Her name is Christine Stinson, and she's the Wayne County Health Department official here. So that is the county level health department where this incident took place.
I mean, first of all, and I'm not going to bullshit that I'm an expert on this, but there's not like one type of plastics in this plastic recycling. There's a lot of different types of plastics, all which have their a different fingerprint as far as if they burn and go into the air. So it's just beyond. They're only really talking about benzene, styrene, but you don't hear dioxins, which that was one of the first things the chemist I spoke to mentioned. What was the other one?
Purines.
The microplastics. It just seems to me like there's an unwritten manual of how to minimize these things, and they're basically making it seem that as soon as the fire is out, the risk is gone, which is kind of what they made it seem like in East Palestine. And if you're watching from East Palestine, you're still living this. Nobody has answered what is causing all of these health symptoms in East Palestine. Dizziness, burning eyes, rashes, which are actually chemical burns. We just showed you yesterday residents on city water, which they have claimed is safe. A woman's back, complete rashes, the side of her breast, fingers, hands. That comes after we showed you another woman on city water in East Palestine. Weeks after they're claiming it's fine. Her face, rashes, her legs, her feet. So
And that's in addition
basically-
to that's in addition to all of the other symptoms that folks are still having there, I'll say.
And I'm not trying to, dramatically hype fear. Obviously fear sells. That's why the media only covers these things for a week. If you're lucky, they'll cover it for a week when the fire is still there. After that, they want nothing to do with it. That's what makes us different, because we stay on these stories. Lewis, we're hopefully going to be able to send him to East Palestine again by the end of this month. I'm trying to go back to Flint. It's the 9-year anniversary. Flint still does not have clean water 9 years later. We're covering a Kalamazoo, Michigan, toxic pollution in the air coming from a paper mill, a toxic gas that's been pumped into the air for over a decade, which the governor of Michigan is allowing. There's so much going on and so much contamination, but I'm just getting from all of them, they don't know, but they're trying to give off an aura of authority and expertise, and we're doing all the testing, when in reality, one hand doesn't know what the other one's doing. They probably are scrambling to find out all the contaminants that were in that plant. It's just because it's a plastic plant doesn't mean plastic was the only thing in that plant.
Right.
And they're not being honest that we don't know. And I don't really know what rule book or what handbook is saying the evacuation zone should only be a half mile. It was ridiculous that the evacuation zone in East Palestine was only a mile.
Mm-hmm. And frankly, there probably isn't a rule book. It's probably a very, very, very arbitrary guess. I mean, I could be wrong in this. We're speculating a little bit, but in East Palestine, the 1 mile buffer, I mean, that decision was supposedly made based on the information for a 1-car vent and burn and the potential for an explosion of that 1 car. The decision was then made to raise that level to 5 cars, and the evacuation zone stayed the same. How did that math does not add up? If you go from burning 1 to 5, you 5x the amount of cars that you're going to burn. You would think that the evacuation zone maybe doesn't 5x, but it should have done some sort of difference in the change, and that was when they actually had a couple days to do the modeling. This just happened. You know what I mean? This happened much quicker. And this arbitrary half a mile number comes up. One other thing that I'll point out that was brought up, I believe it was in the health department person speaking, but it may have been the EPA gentleman as well. They said as the fire extinguishes, more ground level smoke will occur, because obviously when the fires first happen, a lot of the smoke goes straight up in the air with all of the thermal energy kind of causing it to go up. As the fire extinguishes, it kind of turns in, like even with like a campfire, smoke kind of like settles down closer to the ground level. That is also probably going to be a time with a lot of dangerous stuff going even more directly into the neighborhoods at the street level where people are standing and walking. I'll be curious again how quickly folks are told that it's okay to go back into this half a mile radius, especially given that information, because really, until the fire is fully extinguished and the smoke is fully done, that is when they should really be going into doing the tests in these homes, in these residential areas, to tell people, and if they're going to do the appropriate tests, they then need to take those, the tests that they've done, take the swabs of surfaces and whatnot that they've done, bring them to a lab, do the appropriate testing that needs to be done in a lab before telling people that it's okay to go back. But you can't do that until there is no more essentially ground smoke blowing into these neighborhoods.
So, yeah, I mean, we're going to continue monitoring it, but honestly, I don't really know how much stock you can put in what the EPA and the state health officials are saying. I don't want to tell you to totally disregard what they're saying, but the truth is, sadly, the reality of what's going on here and in a lot of these other places is going to come from the symptoms residents are experiencing and independent testing. That somehow, in all of these cases, in Flint, in East Palestine, probably here, independent testers with far less resources than the federal EPA or the state EPA are finding higher contaminant levels. And remember, in the case of East Palestine, and we keep bringing it up because it's still ongoing, the EPA played dumb in the beginning. Well, we don't really need to test for dioxins, which are some of the most toxic chemicals known to man, because they're just baseline in the air anyway. So we wouldn't really be able to see if there's a huge spike in dioxins in East Palestine because we don't know the baseline level there in the first place. Okay, well, if you test for it, you would know if there's an elevated level now. Who cares what the level was previously? And it took independent testers, residents who were informed by independent experts to demand that the EPA test for dioxins. And then the EPA said, okay, we'll test for dioxins, but wait, it'll be the railroad company testing for dioxins, not the EPA. So the EPA was having the company who poisoned the town test for the dioxins. We still haven't seen Norfolk Southern's data, which I don't trust anyway. So we've only had independent testing from Indiana, ironically. Indiana tested for dioxins, 2 samples that were in East Palestine, and found, 700 parts per million or something like that?
I forget the specific number, but the notable thing was that it was significantly higher than the amount that the EPA themselves said in 2010 causes a significant risk of cancer. So,
And by the way,
specific numbers, but
by the way, it gets worse, because we reported on this last week. There was a whole hubbubaloo in East Palestine because they were going to have an Easter egg hunt in a park that is right near the contaminated creeks that are heavily contaminated. People have gotten sick by that creek. People smell it. They've had aeration machines that Lewis has reported from in East Palestine, pumping the toxic soil out of the water and into the air. But before the Easter egg hunt, the mayor signed off on, you could have the Easter egg hunt in the park, and we're signing off on it because the railroad company has, sanitized the basketball court and tennis courts where they were having the Easter egg hunt. I don't know what that means. I don't know what they sanitized it with. Was it with, what are they spraying, Febreze? But we learned it was framed by the city that the EPA did testing, and the EPA's testing showed the soil in that park was safe. I read the actual test results in the first fucking paragraph. The EPA basically said, this is not the EPA's official positions or policies. Basically saying the EPA did not stand by the results, which were not even tested by the EPA. It was a contractor who tested this park. Right. So the EPA didn't stand by it, and the actual testing said the equipment we're using for a significant amount of the data that we found should not be considered precise or completely accurate. So the media just regurgitates and doesn't actually look under the hood at any of this. But that was dangerous to have kids doing Easter egg hunting in this park because we don't actually know what the real data is because the EPA wouldn't stand by it, and the equipment, apparently by the contractor who put out the test results, said if you see the letter J next to the soil data that we tested, it means it's not completely precise or accurate. And if you look at the data, it had the letter J all over the place. Why I tell you this? They're making it up as they go along, and they are relying on the media to either not report it, because CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, Washington Post, all of them, they moved on from East Palestine after a week, just like they moved on from Flint.
And I'll add, too, that we're not the only ones kind of coming out and saying that this is ridiculous. Last night on the live stream, if you caught that, I played a couple of clips with Dr. Andrew Welton, who is an independent tester who's doing work in East Palestine, and this relates directly to, I would say, here to Indiana, where Welton calls out the fact in this interview as well as in a series of tweets that the EPA, the command structure with everything that went on in East Palestine was all over the map. People were getting results in all sorts of different formats, with different measurements, with different levels of concern, using different organizations. The amount of contractors involved made the whole situation even worse on top of all of that. And that is, at this point, 10 weeks after the disaster in East Palestine. 10 weeks later, it is still an absolute shit show and an absolute mess with the whole structure of how all of the testing has been done and how all of the results have been presented in so many absolutely confusing ways that residents are looking at it and they're having a hard time understanding it, and experts even are looking at it and they're needing to do conversions, trying to get this result to match this result because they did it in different formats, and it's an absolute disaster. Here, they've got a chance to start from scratch and to get this all organized, but it seems like they're just kind of willy-nilly, randomly testing some things, but not testing others. They don't know exactly what's in the manifest of what was in the building. Manifest is probably the wrong word, but they don't know what's exactly in the building. They need to be doing blanket tests for all sorts of things until they can figure out what was in that building. So, again, not just us here saying that the structure of how all this testing has been done, the decisions being made, have been all over the place, confusing, haphazard, insufficient, inadequate, to use a word that Andrew Welton himself used. So not only us, but experts who study this sort of thing, who come in and test for these sorts of things, are also sounding the alarm. So this isn't just us saying this. Again, we've said a whole bunch of times, we're not experts in this. We have gotten pretty good at a lot of this stuff, I'll say, because unfortunately we've had to learn a lot about it. But actual experts on the subject are calling out these decisions as well. Andrew Welton, we've talked to Aaron Bragg a couple times on the show, called out a lot of the things in interviews that I've done with him. Others as well, on and off the record, calling this sort of stuff out for what it is, which is an absolute mess. The EPA has not done, they've shown that they cannot do a good job of organizing this information, presenting it in a way that is understandable by the general public, because that's what their job should be. They're there to make sure that you and I and the people in these towns where these are being affected right now are going to be fine and safe and being provided with good information. But they are not being provided with good information. They're being provided with, frankly, in a lot of cases, bullshit and lies and nothing in some cases. I mean, right now, we saw the gentleman look down at his, he's like, oh, we don't know what was in the building. We don't know what was in the building. Then how do you know that it's safe? You don't know that it's safe. You don't know that that happened outside.
Lewis, I want to also bring up, and keep smashing that like button. We got 500 people watching. Keep pressing that like button. Colin, I just sent it to you. If you could put it back up. Lewis covered this yesterday. He did the live stream solo. Why East Palestine? Why we keep bringing this up? Because it's very connected. I'm very careful. I don't have a blanket policy, do not trust anything the government ever tells you, because I think that's too broad a brush. They don't always lie to you. Sometimes they get it right. For example, the government kept saying Russia's going to invade Ukraine. People said, well, they said Iraq. They said weapons of mass destruction. They said this, so I don't trust anything they said. Sometimes the government gets it right. So I'm not telling you never trust anything the government ever says. However, the government, the EPA, the governor of Ohio, who to this day, I think today 68 days since the East Palestine train derailment, has still not declared a state of emergency. We're pretty much a week or two into this in East Palestine. They said, no, the city water is fine. Totally unrelated to the well water. The city water is fine. Colin, let's show it. Sorry if you saw this yesterday, but we've got to show it again. This is residents in East Palestine on city water. If you can show the picture. Look at that woman's back. That's a full back rash from the city water in East Palestine. If you go down, and we did get permission, we're not just showing you boob photos, but this is, side boob. She's got a rash on her boob. If you go down, she's got a rash on her back. She's got a rash on her boob. This is her husband. Little bumps and rashes on his fingers, on his hand. If you keep going down, this is the other woman that we showed you a couple weeks ago. That's her before. That's her after taking a shower on city water. Not like 2 months ago, we're talking 3 weeks ago. Full face rash. That's from the city water that they're saying is safe. So that's why I say you gotta trust the residents who are sending you the pictures, who are telling you how they feel. You gotta trust the reporters who are actually going. Lewis was there, 2.5 weeks ago?
Yep.
Remind people of your symptoms, even though they're saying it's all gravy.
Right. I mean, after spending time outside in a resident's backyard, who she's been told her home and area is safe, with Sulphur Run running right in her backyard, sore throat, neck tightening up, really bad headache that lasted for a couple hours. Among other things, my eyes were burning inside of her home, so I've experienced all of those symptoms. And again, it's the residents. it's journalists like me, it's other journalists who've also talked about getting sick there. And then on top of that now, you also have the CDC, were going door to door to report on, or to go check in on and study resident health symptoms. Members of the CDC got sick. And actually, they finally, weeks later, came out and put it out in the public. CNN, actually, thanks to them for covering it, did a story on it, saying that members of the CDC got sick. In addition to that, I mentioned Andrew Welton earlier. Andrew Welton, in an interview that I talked about last night, described himself getting sick as a result of this. And these are all instances where people were not feeling ill or sick before. I described myself, I wasn't dehydrated or anything like that. I wasn't feeling sick in any other way. I wasn't nervous about being there. This was near the end of my second trip. So it's not like I was nervous about potentially having something happen while I was there. And I was noticing these symptoms. Dr. Welton talked similarly about this. Members of the CDC talked similarly about this, at least in the report that we were able to get when CNN put that out. So it's the residents, and their issues are being validated a little bit more when you've got the CDC coming out and saying it. And it shouldn't need to be that. People should be listening to them at face value because they're not lying. I can tell you, again, I've been there, and I think I'd be able to tell if every single person that I was talking to was lying to me, okay? So it's not like it's one or two people and we're cherry picking them out. That is not the case. This is an ongoing thing there. Residents have still gotten sick. I experienced some of the symptoms myself. Folks like Dr. Welton experienced some of the symptoms himself, as well as the CDC experiencing the symptoms and admitting it.
Absolutely. Let me see one more thing. And by the way, if you're new to Status Coup, we got 500 people watching. Please subscribe to this channel. Also, we don't just talk from our studio here. We get out there. Lewis has already been to East Palestine twice. I've been to Flint. I'm about to make my 19th reporting trip to Flint in 6 years. I'm also working on a book on Flint, hopefully a documentary soon. So please, if you can, we're not funded by Norfolk Southern. We're not funded by the banks, the fossil fuel companies, real estate, Silicon Valley, big pharma. Our funding comes directly from you. Please sign up, statuscoup.com/join. You can become a member for as low as $5 a month. Your membership is how we fund all this. You might think it's nothing. If you keep stacking up, $5, members. We've fortunately grown over the last 2 months covering East Palestine. We could keep going back and stay on these stories. That's why other outlets abandon these stories right away, because they don't think it's financially profitable for them. They don't think the viewers care enough for them to stay on those stories. We know that's not the truth. We know there's a huge demand for actual reporting in these communities to expose the lies from the EPA, the health officials, to expose the lies from the politicians who are telling you everything is okay. But you have to stay on the stories to keep exposing them. You have to keep in contact with residents. Lewis and I have been in contact with residents from East Palestine every day for 2 months. I've been in contact with residents from Flint for 7 years. You have to keep investigating, and that takes money. So please sign up, statuscoup.com/join. Before we move on to East Palestine, I want to make one thing very clear. Unfortunately, the media is going to stay on Indiana, if you're lucky, maybe for another couple days. If you're lucky, maybe for a couple more days. And you might say, devil's advocate, well, Jordan, there's war in Europe, and, we got to cover other things. These are multi-billion-dollar corporate media outlets. They have way more resources than us. They could walk and chew gum at the same time. They could pontificate about the 2024 election and do the Trump perp walk watch 24/7 while covering environmental disasters. Mm-hmm. Why the people in Flint and East Palestine and East Chicago, which I've covered, and North Carolina, where I've covered the PFAS contamination, and Pittsburgh and many other places I've covered, why they're screwed is because normally when your boat crashes, you don't expect the rescue choppers to kind of come close and then turn back. That's basically the equivalent of what goes on in these environmental catastrophes. You feel like right away, if you're a resident, you feel like you're gonna get help because all the media is there, and for a hot minute they all care, and then they're gone. That's what's happening in East Palestine right now. That's what's happened in Flint. Yes, they are killing us slowly. And we are not like that. We can only cover so much. It's only me, Lewis. We have some kind of freelance people reporting, commentating. We don't have full resources that I would like. If you are a wealthy person watching and you're not corrupt and you want to give us more resources, feel free to reach out. info@statusquo.com. I'd love to take your money with no strings attached. But the last thing I'll say on this is the fire's still going. As far as we know, it's going to go for days. The chemist I've been talking to also made a point that I want to bring up. For this fire or any of these major fires, people also have to consider what fire retardant they are using. That stuff also has PFAS in it. Hopefully they stop using that. So the firefighting foam and stuff like that, you've seen that at military bases where firefighting foam causes contamination and PFAS, which are those forever chemicals. So that's a good point. Lewis, any other thoughts on Indiana before we move on to some concerning things in East Palestine?
No, I mean, I'm just, my top concern and what I think folks should really be looking for is when our residents, specifically in this half a mile zone who were evacuated, I'm very curious to find out when the evacuation orders there are lifted, as well as what the language is that tells them that it's okay to go back, because until there are actual residential home tests, I've seen the mistakes made on residential home testing in East Palestine. I've reported on it extensively. We've got a great piece on Substack that went into that as well. If you're not on our Substack already, substack.statusquo.com. You can check that out there. You also get notifications when we post links there, so that's a good spot to check that out. But I've seen the mistakes made in East Palestine as far as telling people it's okay to go home. This neighborhood in particular that is right next to this is definitely like the top concern for me. I think the smoke going elsewhere is also a major concern, but there's no doubt in my mind that these houses really close by are going to be affected by this, really do need there to be some sort of in-home testing being done before these folks are told that it's okay to return. So I think that's something that I'll definitely be looking into here moving forward.
And by the way, again, not a chemist, not a meteorologist, I think it's reckless. If you live in Dayton, Ohio, or any further west than Dayton, Ohio, and Richmond, Indiana, it's 46 miles, 50 minutes.
And I'll say too, in case we have anybody watching in that area, if you are there and you want to get in touch, please email us info@statusquo.com. Especially if they do start to do some of these residential home tests, it'd be great to be able to fill you in. I can even connect you with some experts on the right questions to ask these folks when they're in your home, because some of the stuff that I've seen from videos of this happening in residents' homes in East Palestine and answers that are being provided were wholly inadequate. And if you can go in with the right questions at hand, ready to go, I think it would help do a service. So if you're interested, I'd love to chat with some folks who are in that area. info@statusquo.com. Send us an email, and we'll make sure that we follow up with you there.
And by the way, where is, like, if you live in Dayton, Ohio, or Western Ohio, shouldn't your government officials be giving you information? Hey, there's a massive inferno about, 50 miles west. Pay attention. Be on the lookout for alerts.
Mm-hmm.
The EPA casually said, yeah, we did some testing in Ohio overnight. Okay. It's just one hand doesn't know what the other's doing. I can't guarantee it, but I did reach out to Erin Brockovich. We might have an interview with her tomorrow on this and the latest with East Palestine. So stay tuned for that. A couple updates on East Palestine. I know you haven't seen this yet, Lewis, but I just wanted to kind of give a couple updates. Colin, if you could show in the East Palestine section, So apparently now, you could show this Facebook post. That's the first thing. Be very careful about posting that you haven't been home. The village of East Palestine is now charging people $200 that they have identified as, quote, vacating their property. This letter in reference to a property in the 1 mile zone also. East Palestine, profit over people. I don't know if you could click on that letter. Greetings. The Village of East Palestine has an ordinance requiring registration of vacant residential and commercial buildings within the village limits. By record, you own a duplex with neighbors. This structure has been identified as being vacant, which therefore requires it to be registered. A fee of $200 per unit is payable to the Village of East Palestine due immediately. Additionally, there are currently trash and junk violations occurring. So this is not one person. I heard this from several people, that people who have basically left because their homes are unsafe have gotten letters basically saying that your property is vacant, the trash is piling up, whatever. I mean, this is as dystopian as what Lewis reported last week, that people in East Palestine were told, oh no, the W-9 form that you're filling out at the Norfolk Southern Reimbursement Center, it's not for you to pay taxes on, it's just for our records, only for them to find out later, oh no, you're gonna have to pay taxes on the reimbursement money for the hotel or other derailment related money that they're getting reimbursed for. Obviously, they shouldn't be taxed on money. They didn't ask to be relocated to hotels, this and that. They have to be because their homes smell like petrochemical toxic shit still. But people are going to be fined. I mean, if it's an unrelated thing and a home has just been abandoned for longer than the East Palestine derailment, that's for the city to decide. But my understanding is they're sending these notices out to people who have been gone as a result of the East Palestine derailment, which is crazy.
It is crazy, and that's weird to me. I mean, like, okay, if they're not there, the trash isn't going to be piling up. I can't imagine what that might be. Or are they, like, spying on these people? Like, how do you know? How are they pointing out that these are vacant homes? That's bizarre to me. And not to mention, people are still relocated right now because they're still digging up tracks in town. It looks like to me one side of the tracks, they've almost finished removal of the soil on one side of the track. So they're almost halfway done with the soil removal from underneath the tracks, the contaminated soil removal that Norfolk Southern buried all of these chemicals underneath the tracks to get the railroad back open again quickly. So they still have another at least month, maybe 2 months of work to do on the other side of the tracks, where they're going to dig up essentially a half-a-mile scar right through the middle of town again. That is going to continue to affect the air quality, continue to affect potentially the water quality in the area. That's ridiculous to me. That was the first I'd heard of that.
So we'll try to look further into that. I mean, honestly, doing my best. I'm on deadline for a book and other things too, so we can't cover it all. Sorry to people who have reached out. You know, we have residents reaching out to us because we're really one of the only ones covering it, and we'd love to cover every aspect, but you know, Lewis has a life and I got a newborn and other things. Welcome new Status Quo member Hubs just signed up. Welcome, Hubs. Thanks for signing up as a new Status Quo member. By the way, we still haven't done our monthly members call. Last month was great. We had more people than we've had in a while. So if you sign up as a Status Quo member, you get access to our monthly Zoom call as well. So that's a lot of fun. We'll probably do it next week or the week after. We usually go for an hour or two on Zoom, so keep signing up if you can. The other thing I wanted to touch on here, this is just crazy. If you have this Facebook link with the video column, the next thing on the live doc.
Such as where they were in relation to the derailment. And if you're talking about a headache, then you certainly would also want to look into other things such as mental health, because that can affect things like headaches. So there's really not a good answer to that question because it's very individualized based on the patient and what they present with.
So that is a new, I think, permanent health clinic they're opening up in East Palestine. If you are familiar with the first health clinic, Lewis, you were there, so you could just refresh people's mind what that health clinic was.
So the first health clinic, I went there and actually went to go see for myself what it was. That first health clinic was providing essentially somebody to talk to, providing some guidance for you, they'll provide you a referral to a doctor. But what was most important about that first health clinic was what it was not providing. That first health clinic was not providing any sort of diagnosis. It was not providing any sort of urine or blood testing. It was not providing any sort of prescriptions. And frankly, if we weren't there, most of the media who was covering that health clinic essentially just read the press release that was given to them from the state officials, the local officials that said, "Oh, we're opening this great new health clinic in town." Because I was getting some crazy looks for reporting fairly negatively from in front of that health clinic. But yes, that health clinic was not providing any real assistance. So it sounds like this is a permanent clinic that they're now opening in East Palestine. What was the question, I guess, that was being asked there? Yeah.
Well, it's just interesting because they've already had, I think, gaslighting pamphlets sent out claiming your rashes are probably from stress. But here, I don't know who that woman was again. Colin, play it one more time.
Questions such as where they were in relation to the derailment. And if you're talking about a headache, then you certainly would also want to look into other things such as mental health, because that can affect things like headaches. So there's really not a good answer to that question because it's very individualized based on the patient and what they present with.
So yeah, if you have a headache, it's probably your mental health, depression, anxiety. Just like if you have a rash, it's probably a stress rash. Literally, the petri dish of chemicals that have been found in East Palestine, mostly by independent testers, you can get headaches from them. You can get rashes from them. Sure, people are stressed, they're traumatized, but you keep hearing from health officials that your skin rashes, now your headaches,
Dan, are
they're
you
from
careful?
mental health.
Yep. Yep.
That
the
doesn't
whole,
make any sense.
the whole town all at the same time all started developing all of these things collectively because they all started having mental health problems all together. Oh, it just was a coincidence though that a massive train filled with toxic chemicals derailed in their backyard, and then the decision was made to set it all on fire. And then these folks had to breathe in the aftermath of that and had their creeks contaminated that run through the middle of town. That was the coincidence. Really, the entire town just all was on the verge of having a major mental health crisis, causing them to get rashes and headaches. I mean, if you think otherwise, you're a crazy person.
I mean, don't get it twisted. There are